Hello, good evening. Again, my name is Susana Porras, and I am the author of Compostela and Beyond, a poet's chronicle of the Camino de Santiago. Now, before I get started this evening, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I ended up on the Camino. I took my dad to Europe for the first time in 2017, and it was there that I first told him about the Camino. And up until the moment that I told my dad about the Camino, he had shown a lot of interest and enthusiasm in everything that he saw and learned in Europe. But when I told him about the Camino, he actually became a little annoyed, and he says, you know, at my age, I don't need to be talking about 500-mile pilgrimages. And so with that, I kind of dropped the subject. We never spoke about it again. And we had a wonderful rest of our trip, and we came home. And so a few days later, we're sitting at home in the living room watching television with my mom. And my dad casually looks over at me and he says, you know, I want to go on Camino next year. And I can't tell you how many things went through my mind, you know, including the fact that my dad was 72 years old at the time, you know. And, you know, but when your 72-year-old dad asks you to go on Camino, then you need to figure out how to make it happen. And so I spent the next 9 months researching and planning our clothing, equipment, routes, points of interest, the history, everything that I could in order to make this trip happen and make it as seamless as possible. Ironically, though, the one thing that I didn't look into was where we would eat along on the Camino, where we would get the fuel that we needed to walk those 500 miles. And so I spoke with my dad briefly about it, and we discussed it, and we both kind of came up with the conclusion that we would eat some sandwiches along the way or snacks, whatever we found that, you know, we could use to get us through the Camino. And with that final detail taken care of, we set off on Camino, and we fly to Paris, where we take a connecting flight to Biarritz, and by June 2nd, we're at the base of the Pyrenees Mountains in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, registering for the Camino and picking up our credentials. And we weren't going to start walking until the following day. And so we went to one of the local restaurants to get something to eat. And I decided that I would get something that would help us get us over the 4,000-foot climb that we had the next day over the Pyrenees Mountains. And so I ordered a salad, meat, and potatoes. And I could tell that the waitress was really uncomfortable with my order, but she didn't quite tell me what it was that I was doing wrong. And when the meal arrived, I realized that I had ordered enough food for about 4 people. And so with that, that was our introduction to the cuisine of the Camino de Santiago. And so I have prepared this culinary pilgrimage of sorts for you today. Please remember that this pilgrimage was done pre-COVID, so I'm not 100% sure if the restaurants that I'm going to be speaking to you about today are still fully functioning or if they're still owned and operated by the same people that were there when we were there. I'm hoping that they are, and they continue to serve pilgrims for many, many years to come. And I'm also going to be using the term pilgrims quite a bit, and that's just the traditional name that's given to the hikers that do the Camino de Santiago. And so with that, I hope that you enjoy this feast for the eyes that I have prepared for you. And bon appetit, buen provecho, and buen camino. And so here we were in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, having our first Camino meal. Except that, as it turns out, we weren't even in France, we were in Basque Country. And the Basque people are Europe's oldest European group. And experts date their existence to that specific area back 3,000 to 5,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. And they also have the longest continuously used language in all of Europe. The Basque people have been very successful in maintaining their traditions, their culture, and their language, mostly due to their geographical location and the protection they've received from the Pyrenees Mountains. So for centuries, they've been able to ward off invasions from the Romans, the Muslims, the Spanish, and the French because of their vast knowledge of this geographic area. And it's this same preservation of culture that has really allowed them to develop a cuisine that is renowned worldwide. And so here we were in Basque country, having our first Basque meal, a Basque chuleta. And a Basque chuleta is a juicy, tender, melt in your mouth, a rib steak with the perfect amount of fat, seasoned with just the right amount of sea salt, and it's been perfected for the last 5,000 years. And so I think at that moment, my dad and I realized that we weren't just going to be having sandwiches on the Camino de Santiago. We were going to be having some pretty spectacular and unique dishes on the Camino, which brings me to my next point. And this is going to sound a little cliche, but I really do think that food has the potential of helping us really understand other cultures and bringing cultures together. Many years ago, I was a foreign exchange student in the south of France, and my host mother would prepare these beautiful, elaborate meals that we would eat every single day from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And coming from a Guatemalan family, my parents always taught me to be polite, a polite guest, and to eat the food that was given to me when I was a guest. And this case was no different. And my French wasn't very good at the time, and so food became really the way that we communicated. And this went on for the next few months. And finally, it came time for me to leave. And the day I left, my host mother presented me with this beautiful French cookbook. And she says to me, you know, you've been, I'm really going to miss you because you've been the only American student who's eaten all of my food. And that really taught me a lot, and it gave me a lot of insight and into how we approach food when we travel. And so from then on, it wasn't just about being polite. It was more about seeking the opportunities to make a much deeper connection with the people that serve and prepare our food. And I know how hard it can be to eat something that you don't like. You know, trust me, I've been there, you know. But if you have an open mind and an open heart, you really have an opportunity to see that there is a lot of culture in the food, and you begin to understand why the food tastes the way that it does, and they may eventually become some of your favorite foods. And that's pretty much what happened with me and this pepper right here. And by the time we reached Pamplona, it was pretty clear that I didn't know what I was doing when I was ordering food. And so I asked the waiter to please bring me a plate of food that he thought I would enjoy. And he brought me this beautiful breaded veal steak with the Russian salad with tuna and French fries and this really big pepper on top of it. And the pepper is kind of like a bell pepper, and it was seared and lightly seasoned. And I didn't really like it at first, but this pepper kept coming up over and over and over again in our meals. And so eventually I really began to like them, and they became one of my favorite things on the Camino. And now that I think back on the Camino, it's one of the things that I really miss the most. Wine on the Camino de Santiago. And yes, folks, you read it correctly. There's some free wine on the Camino de Santiago. But before you all pack up your bags and leave, I do want to make it absolutely clear that I'm not endorsing drinking and walking on the Camino de Santiago. It is really important to stay hydrated on the Camino. The average pilgrim will walk an average of 14 to 16 miles per day, so wine really should not be the beverage of choice. However, pilgrims also take an average of 3 to 4 rest days when they're on Camino. And so if you do decide to sample the wines of the region, it's probably best to do so during those days. Now, wine did exist in Spain during the medieval period, but the technical and the agricultural and the wine varieties that we know today were introduced by the Romans. And it is thanks to them that we've developed the wines that we love and enjoy today. There are 7 well-established routes on the Camino de Santiago, and all of them have their own wine varieties. But my father and I took the most traditional route, which was the French route. And the French way has 4 designation of origin wines, or 4 DO wines. DO Navarra produces red wines and white wines, But this region has been historically known to produce rosés. And if you walk on the Camino de Santiago, you'll find them on a pretty long stretch between Pamplona, which is in Navarra, all the way to La Rioja. And this is one of their most famous rosés. This is the Garnacha rosé that one of you lucky people will get to take home today. And the next one, this is the Diorioja. Diorioja is one of the best known and appreciated wines worldwide. And its maturation usually occurs in oak barrels. The Rioja pairs really well with many different types of cuisine. And its most commonly used and cultivated red wine variety is the Tempranillo grape, which is what you will find in this bottle right here. The Tierra de León, the Dio Tierra de León, is found between two routes on the Camino de Santiago, between the French Way and the Via de Plata. And that's been a wine-producing region since ancient times. And their most characteristic Dio is the native Prieto Picudo, which is the name that's given to the grape bunch, which means that it's tight with little space in between and the grapes peak finish. These wineries are located in caves that are excavated into the clay rock, and which creates a microclimate where wine maturation is ideal. And finally, the Bierzo. That one grows in a very special climate that grows away from the rigors of the Atlantic coast and in a higher humidity than the rest of Castile and Leon. And it has what is called terroir in it, which means that it has very distinguishable features that have to do with the geographic and the climatic conditions of the region where it is produced. So if you take these grapes and produce them somewhere else, it would no longer be a Bierzo wine. Food accessibility on the Camino de Santiago. Now, obviously, my dad and I had, some concerns about accessibility of food on the Camino. But the more we walked, the more we realized that really wasn't going to be a problem. This dish that you see here featured has fish, veggies, and fries. And it also came with a generous portion of lentil soup as well as a flan. And this entire meal was 12 euros, which is an equivalent of about $14. And that's with the tip included. And this is what we found time and time again on the Camino, that the food was quite excellent. The portions were very generous, and that the price was something that we could afford. Breakfast. I know that I said that I didn't plan for the meals. I did plan for breakfast. And some of you in here who know me well enough know that I will not leave my house without a full breakfast. And that was the case on the Camino de Santiago as well. And you have to remember that my dad was 73 years old by the time we left on Camino, and I wasn't going to let him walk out the front door without a full belly. And the way that I did this was that instead of staying at the traditional albergues or hostels, we stayed in small pensions and hotels, which offered a much more generous breakfast. And, there were different things, like they had more beverages, eggs, different types of breads, pastries, cereals, yogurts, all different things for breakfast items. So it was a really nice variety. And even though it was a little bit more expensive, it worked out really well because we ate so much that it tied us over all the way to either a late lunch or an early dinner. And we supplemented our 2 large meals with snacks in between. Now, this is something that you'll find quite often in all of the eating establishments along the Camino de Santiago. And they have a list of all of the things that they offer for the pilgrim menu, which is a little bit more affordable than the regular meal. And the pilgrim menu has 2 to 3 courses. Sometimes it comes with a little bit of bread, a little bit of wine, a dessert or a coffee. It's a good value. The half menu will probably cost you about 7 euros, and the full menu maybe about 9 or 10 euros, depending on where you're getting it. But the meals are pretty standard. And you're going to find that you'll have like 3 choices, like the pasta and then 2 meat dishes. And then it'll come with a little bit of vegetables and maybe some French fries or something. But my dad and I mostly had the menu of the day and menú del día, and that was because it was a little bit higher quality. The price wasn't that much more. It was maybe only 2, 3, 4 euros more, and the portions were a little bit more generous. And more importantly, the variety was a lot better as well. And the menu del día actually came from Franco during the Second World War. He wanted to make sure that the workers were able to afford a meal that was complete. This was probably my favorite part of the Camino, not because we were hungry, but because I could sit down. And so, the snack breaks really were very helpful. Most of the snacks, the snacks were really a really good variety. It was like yogurt and honey and tea, or coffee and a pastry, or a small sandwich. This particular sandwich that my dad is eating right here, there was a local that stopped us a couple of kilometers before we got to the small town of El Puntido. She said that the best tortilla on the Camino was in El Puntido. And I'm like, I've been in tourist traps before, right? I'm like, sure, it's the best tortilla, right? So as we got closer, I decided to make a pit stop. And I said, let's just try the best tortilla on the Camino. And it really was the best tortilla on the Camino. We ended up trying a few more tortillas as time went on. And it was actually so good that I ended up featuring it in the book. So she was correct. So it's in there. Address and all, El Puntido. Vegetarian and vegan options on the Camino de Santiago. I took about 75 meal-related pictures on the Camino. And I had one vegan dish. Of course, we had other salads on the Camino, but they had proteins, and so they had fish or eggs or cheeses on them. You have to remember, this is cattle country. This is Spain, so it's kind of like Texas on steroids. So, everywhere you go, there's meat. But I have to say that the eating establishments are making a very good effort to meet the needs of everybody's food preferences. So whenever you go to all of the different food establishments, you'll find little signs that say vegetarian this or vegan that. And if you still don't find something that you like, you can go to the small mom and pop grocery stores or the open air markets. And many of the albergues will have like a kitchen where you can prepare your food. So, yeah, there are definitely some options. This is a big plus on the Camino. I mean, this is what you go to the Camino for. You go to meet new people and talk with people from all over the world and make these connections. You always walk into these eating establishments and you always find there's a familiar face in them. My dad and I never once made any like lunchtime plans or dinner plans with anybody. It just happened that we would walk into a restaurant and we would find a hiker that we hadn't seen in 5 days, and we would sit down and catch up, and exchange stories. So it's a wonderful opportunity to, bond and, share your life story and do your exchanges. I can't think of another place to do it, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere. There's no cell phone reception and stuff. So there's plenty of time to make some really good connections. These people that you see in the picture here, Glenn is from Canada. I still keep in touch with him through Instagram. And Mary, she lives out in Georgia, and I still keep in touch with her by text. Camino desserts. Now you're going to find some of your basic desserts that like churros with chocolate or flan. Those are your basics. But you're going to find a wonderful variety of desserts. And after walking 14 to 16 miles, you deserve your cake, And so my dad and I probably ate maybe 2 or 3 desserts a day. And I only lost like 5 pounds on the entire Camino. I do have to say something a little off topic about this particular restaurant. When it was time for us to have, our late lunch or our dinner, we wouldn't walk very far to get to wherever we were eating. Whatever we found, it wasn't like I was Googling anything. Whatever we found, that's what we would go to. And we went into this restaurant, Cafeteria Gaudi Hotel, and I couldn't tell from the outside, but when we walked in, it was a really nice restaurant. And you have to remember by then, oh my gosh, we had walked 299 miles. So we were a mess, We had 2 outfits on the Camino, hiking outfit number 1 and hiking outfit number 2. So you can just imagine what we looked like, after 299 miles, right? But we walked into this restaurant, beautiful wood paneling on the walls, chandeliers hanging off the ceiling, and a beautiful view of the Gaudi Palace across the street from their beautiful windows with the wood trim. I can honestly say that they treated us spectacularly. Never were we made to feel like we didn't belong there. Everybody's very compassionate on the Camino de Santiago. I think it's because a lot of the people that serve you on the Camino have done the Camino themselves. And so they know what you're going through. And these people were very nice. And I know that I'm highlighting this beautiful mascarpone cheese thing with the raspberry drizzle on it. That was absolutely delicious. But their meal was excellent as well, by the way. Okay. Food farms and cooperatives. You have to remember that you're not going through many cities on the Camino de Santiago. The 4 major cities that you're going through are Pamplona, Logroño, Burgos, and León. And the rest of it is purely agricultural. And so one thing that I would like to point out that I haven't really seen in the guidebooks is that if you have a favorite fruit or a vegetable, you may want to find out when it's in season so that you can match up your trip to the season here on the Camino de Santiago. Myself, for example, I absolutely love figs. I'll eat figs, on their own, or I'll have fig jam, or I like my figs with a little bit of cheese and honey. And all throughout the 5 weeks that my dad and I were walking, we're watching these figs grow and grow and grow. And then we left. So I didn't. That was the saddest part of my Camino. If I would have only stayed 1 more week, that was one of 2 regrets on the entire Camino, by the way. So, yeah, make sure you match up your Camino to your favorite foods. Regional food. My dad made a funny comment. He said, I've never seen you eat so much. And, you're going through 7 different provinces on the French way on the Camino de Santiago. And each one has their own wines, their own cheeses, their own pastries. You really have to take advantage of it when you're there locally, because otherwise you may not get it, when you're in the next province. And so I really made an effort to eat everything that I could, and this that you see here is membrillo. It's quincy paste, and they usually serve it with cheese. It pairs really well with manchego cheese. I'm not sure if that was manchego cheese. I should have asked, because the manchego cheese I normally eat is a little bit harder and drier. And this was a little bit smoother and softer. But it paired really well. It was absolutely delicious. And one lucky person in here is going to get to take it home with a $10 gift certificate to buy some cheese. Okay? So finally, for a taste of the Camino, Sasso is a restaurant that just opened up on El Molino. And it's anybody know? It's a Basque restaurant. Exactly. And their gem salad is my absolute favorite. And you can get this quincy paste either at Whole Foods or Ralph's. And the other 2 places you can get any of these bottles of wines, they're at Total Wine and More and Mission Wines and Spirits.
What's across the street on the El Molino restaurant?
Colorado. It's right next to the Playhouse.
Got it.
Yeah, cool. And with that, I'm ready for any questions, unless I've answered everybody's questions. Yeah, they have French fries on everything. They love their fries. Yeah, and I never really bothered to, ask for anything else because I love fries. So I was absolutely fine with it. I never substituted anything. It was funny because in that restaurant where I showed you the dessert, there was a family there. I'm not going to say what country they were from, but one of the desserts they had was chocolate cake. And they must have given the poor waiter 101 questions about the chocolate cake. It's chocolate cake, you know what I mean? And then they didn't eat the chocolate cake, So I really tried to be as accommodating to everybody and eat the food as it came. I never made any substitutions on any of my food.
You said your first disappointment was not having figs on the Camino. What was the second?
My second was that we finished the Camino on July 6th. On July 6th was our last day, and that was the first day of the running of the bulls. Yeah, and it goes on for a few days, but I had been out of work for 5 weeks, as some of you know. And I really had to come back to work. But, and, you know, now that I think back on it, I'm like, oh, I should have stayed at least a couple of more days so I could go back to Pamplona and watch the running of the bulls. Yeah, that was my second one. Yeah. Yeah, but that gives me an excuse to go back if anybody wants to go with me. Yeah. 5. I was gone for 5 weeks. Yeah.
So your mom didn't want to go?
Oh, no, my mother actually left off on vacation herself. So she went back home to Guatemala. And actually, that's another story, too. My mom left to Guatemala a week before we did. And she was in Guatemala for 7 weeks. And we were very comfortable with the fact that, you know, her family was going to take care of her and that she was going to be fine. Well, my mother's house is next to the volcano of fire. And on June 3rd, when we started our Camino, the volcano exploded. Yeah. So on June 4th, when I woke up, I see my phone. And my phone had blown up with all of the information, obviously. And so for the first few hours that day, you know, my dad and I didn't talk about it because we were kind of in shock. But we were, I think both of us pretty sure that my mom hadn't made it, you know, because you can see the volcano fire, like literally it's next door to my mother's house. And what happened was that 40 years ago when the volcano exploded, it created a barrier. And so what happened was that all of the stuff that was spewed out by the volcano went the other way. And so my family's house was, you know, completely saved. Yeah. But she said it rained ash for days, that it was just awful. And, you know, and I think about 300 people lost their lives there.
So when I went to Spain, I fell in love with the tapas.
Oh,
and the sangria. So they didn't call it tapas in this.
Yeah, they're called tapas or pinchos. I think in Basque Country they're pinchos. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I can live there.
I know. I actually didn't drink a lot of alcohol on the Camino, though. I didn't. I'm traveling with my dad. It just wasn't a good thing, you know. So I think total on the entire Camino, I don't think I had more than 2 or 3 glasses of wine. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how long is the trip?
It's 500 miles. 500 miles, yeah. And on the last day, we walked, I think, 24 or 26 miles because we wanted to take a bus to Finisterre, which is the end of the world, or at least people thought it was back in the day. We walked 23 miles on the last day. Yeah. Yeah, 23 miles.
Your dad walked that long around? Your dad?
Oh, yeah. My dad actually did a lot better than I did. You know, you have to remember that I tailored the entire trip for a 73-year-old. And actually, I should do a talk on seniors on the Camino de Santiago because my dad came out of this completely unscathed. Me, I ended up in the emergency room. So I didn't think about my needs, and I should have. You know how they tell you on the airplane, you have to think about yourself first? I didn't do that. But my dad was fine. You know, he wants to go back again, you know. And by the way, I forgot to read you a poem. Let me read you one poem, and then I'll keep answering questions. This is Sonnet 24. And by the way, the reason that this book even came about is because I wanted to maintain contact with my friends back home. And so I thought a sonnet would be a good way because they're short. They're only 14 lines, and I was sending them to them every day. And a couple of the ladies are here that would be reading my wonderful poetry every day. And they were very supportive. They've been very, very supportive this whole entire time. So Sonnet 24, on the way to Mansilla Mayor. The walk continues under the maples, yet sunlight places the shade upon the fields. The subtle afternoon breeze at times enables, with the desired cooler temps it yields. We look forward to our daily snack breaks at tempting eateries along the way, stocked with egg tortillas and homemade cakes. We find it hard to snub a sweet display. Exhausted, we reach our bed and breakfast. Our gracious host bestows a warm greeting, and he insists we wine and dine with guests, a feast we are grateful to be eating. We finish our day with a soccer match, since the earlier game we could not catch. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? No hard ones. Yes, go ahead, please. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yeah. So we went during peak allergy season, and I did take my Claritin D with me. It is no match for the pollen levels out there. You got to take some really strong stuff with you. And I ended up with a really bad eye allergy. They were blood red. I looked like the Shaun of the Dead. I mean, it really scared the heebie-jeebies out of me. I actually took a picture of myself, but it looked so horrible, I erased it. And so now I wish I would have kept it. So I went to the emergency room in Burgos, and of course, I ended up with a really handsome doctor. Not the time that you want them to look into your eyes. So, not good timing. But he gave me some steroid drops, and it cleared up in a few days, and I was fine. Yeah.
What was the elevation of the trail?
The first one, the highest point was almost 5,000 feet. And it kind of stayed pretty even, but that was the highest elevation. And we started at 500. Yeah, and all the way to 5,000.
That's pretty good, because I was saying, I was a skier, so
Oh.
when I was in the 8, 9, 10,000 feet,
Mm-hmm.
it would take me, because our base was like 7,000 feet. It'd take me about a day to get used to where you are.
Oh, absolutely.
And then so you didn't get after that, so that's good. That's why I was asking.
Absolutely. And there are some people that are a little bit more sensitive. And if you are, there is a stop. So there are 3 different ways to get around the Pyrenees Mountains. You can actually go around the Pyrenees Mountains. You can go over in one day, which we did, or you can go up and stay in the middle and then keep going the next day. So that excellent question, by the way. Yeah. So if you do have problems, adjusting to the elevation, you can stay there for one day and then keep going. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you and your dad prepare? Like, did you work out? Did you start walking before the trip?
That was another mistake I made. Yeah. Yeah, my father, yes. My father would, on the weekends, he does, Mount Wilson Trail, the whole 9. Yeah. He, 8, 9 miles on the weekends. Yeah, he was born. He's a lifelong walker. I really had a lot of work. I actually had a new job at the time. And so I needed to leave my job in place and ready for everybody to do everything that they had to do while I was going to be gone for those 5 weeks. Yeah. Yeah. So I should have trained a little bit more. It's very important to do that. And going around the Rose Bowl doesn't do it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, it's 161 times around the Rose Bowl. That's the equivalent of what it would take to finish the Camino de Santiago. Yeah. Yeah. So try doing 161 times around the Rose Bowl in a 1 month period of time. Yeah. Yeah. Jimmy? He can do it. I see him do it all the time. Yeah. And also Miss Odessa, these ladies right here. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, they could do 161 times around the Rose Bowl. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Favorite meal. Actually, that fish dinner that we saw. And I think it was probably because it shocked me so much that it was so good for $14. And I don't know if you could tell on there, but it was actually a really good portion of fish. It wasn't like, a little dinky piece. But the fish was fresh. Everything was really well made. I think that was hands down my favorite meal, just because everything about it was great. The price, the quality, the portions, everything was really nice. Yeah, definitely. And you said favorite city? I think León was probably my favorite city, but I got there that was another thing. I actually organized a trip around the parties. And so we got to León during the festivals of St. Paul and Peter, which, again, everything is outlined in the book. There's parties everywhere. Yeah, the Spanish know how to party. And so it's a really, a good to organize your trip around the festival. So I'm not sure what León would be like without the party scene. But there was plenty to do there. You know, the giants all over the place, fireworks, all different kinds of food vendors, the art displays. I mean, you name it, they had it. And actually, it was probably not the best idea for me to stop there because we stopped in Leon for 3 days for our rest days. And we ended up walking more than we would have if we would have just kept walking. And we didn't really even rest at all. Yeah, so you really have to plan that out really well. Mm-hmm.
Was your meal always paired with wine?
No. Only some of them, if you get the pilgrim meal, they will give you wine. Only sometimes. Yeah. But I always ask for water.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the trip and the wine.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's not a good idea. I mean, you get really dehydrated on the Camino. Yeah. I mean, you know, during your rest days, it's fine, but I just don't see how. But some people can do it. You know, some people can have their glass of wine in the evening and start walking the next day. I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
time of year did you go, and how was the weather at that?
Oh, it was beautiful. We went in May. At the end of May, we left on May 31st. And I timed it that way just because I thought the weather would be better. But coincidentally, we arrived in a year that had flooding. So there was just serious flooding all over the place. But what happened was it provoked an explosion of vegetation everywhere, which I think was what contributed to my allergies. So everywhere we went, there was bouquets of flowers everywhere. But it was mostly due because of the rain. It was just these heavy rains, and it really was beautiful. But I don't know what it would look like if it was just a regular year, because normally, if you look at pictures of the Camino de Santiago, it's very dry and very barren. But all of my pictures, the vegetation is very green. There's flowers everywhere. The skies were blue. The clouds were all beautiful and puffy. So I'm not sure if that's how it is all the time. But I would definitely go again in that month with better allergy medicine, obviously. Yeah.
How was your book composed? Like, how do you have it written out? What kind of book?
You know what? Because I have a really, not to pat myself on the back, but I organized it according to the provinces. Let's see, the provinces and all of the different, I really tried my best when I was writing them for the girls in the office. I really tried my best to describe every last thing that we were doing. And so I didn't realize it until I tried putting an index on it, how many things I actually had talked about. So there's a detailed index on the back. There is an awful lot of information, especially for like 4,000 words. The entire book is only 4,000 words because it's all sonnets. So there's an incredible amount of information in here, especially with the footnotes that you can get information from. But it's definitely organized in order that we did it, and under all of the provinces, the regions, yeah. And there's an introduction, a conclusion, and also a list in the back that details all of the items that I took with me. Yeah.
How was the paella?
Oh, it was absolutely delicious. Yeah. Oh, and there, by the way, I didn't put the paella on here because it's everywhere. I mean, there's paella everywhere. Yeah. But my favorite paella was the last one I had on the last day of the Camino. Yeah, it was absolutely delicious. Galicia. Yeah. So we were closer to the ocean. It was in the paella, and that was one that we shared with the little tour group that we went to, because once we stopped in Santiago, we took a bus. The last 100 kilometers, we just couldn't walk anymore. We took a bus all the way to Finisterre, and that's when we had the nice paella. Yeah. So yeah, tons of paella. Yeah, you'll never miss the paella, definitely.
Can you describe the Spanish tortilla?
Oh, yes. Well, on here I had that it was like a Spanish omelet, but for me it looks more like of a quiche. And they make it with generally with potato, eggs, and onions. You can eat it warm or cold, with or without your baguette. And you can slice it up. So it looks like a little cake, and you can slice it up. Yeah, it's really a nice little flavorful dish that you can have for lunch. Yeah, I'd like to make it sometimes and then just have it for lunch here and there. Yeah.
And they call that a tortilla.
And they call it a tortilla.
Tortilla española.
Yeah, tortilla española. Hence why I was having so much trouble ordering food. Yeah, not working. Yeah, don't order 3 or 4 tortillas on the Camino. Won't work. Yeah. So yeah, but it was really a wonderful experience, and like I said, I definitely wasn't expecting it.
What would you change next time? Like if you went back, your bag you took, the plans you made, you would change the timing?
I would change the timing maybe 1 week later.
And how about what you took? Because that's really important because you're carrying everything. So what
Absolutely.
do you take with you?
There were two things that I should have taken. One of them was a poncho. You know, we're in California. When does it ever rain? You know, I have umbrellas, but they're just for decoration, you know? And so I was like, I didn't want to carry a poncho. I'm like, I could deal with the rain. I don't care if my hair gets wet. Who cares, right? So I didn't take a poncho. And so I thought I could battle out the rain, without a poncho. Big mistake. And that really caused a lot of blisters because I got soaked probably on the third or fourth day. And I ended up with some pretty heavy blisters because of it for the next few days. And the blisters just kept on coming. I mean, they heal and they come back. It was just a mess. But it was because I got so wet. And the other thing that I was too cheap to buy was this kind of like bungee cord thing where you hang up your clothes to dry. Yeah. It was like $12, and the trip was already costing more than I wanted it to, and I didn't buy the little bungee cord to hang up my clothes. You have to wash your clothes every day on the Camino. You come home, you go to the hotel, you're tired, and you have to wash your entire outfit to put out to dry so you can wear it the next day. And that would have definitely been something that was very useful.
Let me ask you about that. Why couldn't you wear the same outfit 2 or 3 days like I do in Pasadena?
Oh, we were so muddy. We were so muddy.
Is that what it is? Is you just get dust and dirt?
You get a lot of dust and dirt. By the time you get out of it, you're just a mess. You're one big sweaty, soppy, wet, muddy mess.
Oh, really?
Every day.
And that's every day?
That's every day.
Oh, my
You have to wash your clothes. There's just no way out of it.
And you only had 2 sets of clothes to
2 sets of clothes. 2 sets. That's it. 2 sets. But they're quick dry.
With the cotton, you carry cotton.
No cotton.
No cotton?
No cotton. No, because cotton doesn't dry. Yeah. No, it doesn't dry. No, you have to get the wicker fabric that takes the sweat away from you. And yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's very light. It washes really fast and you can set it out to dry, and it dries in a few hours. And by the way, the nicer hotels, by the way, because we stayed in, slightly nicer places than the albergues, we always had a blow dryer. So on those days that I wasn't too dry, you know what I mean? So yeah, those little places came in handy.
How about laundry detergent? Take that, or do they provide that?
We took it. Yeah, we took it. And at REI, they have these little tiny laundry detergent things. They're little bottles, and they also sell the little leaves. And so we would wash every day. And when we ran out of those, we just used the hand soap in the hotels too. Yeah.
Was everything in a backpack?
Everything was in a backpack. Oh, I should have brought it. Everything was in a backpack about this size. My backpack weighed about 15 pounds, between 12 to 15 pounds, depending on how much clothes I was wearing. And I try to tell my dad a million times to leave some things at home. And we get to the airport and his backpack weighs 22 pounds. And I'm like, we have the exact same clothes. We bought the same, the same material and actually the same brands. And so it made no sense that his backpack weighed 22 pounds and mine was 15. I know you probably did. Come to find out, he took jeans. He took jeans and an extra pair of sandals and a big bottle of shampoo and, all kinds of stuff. He actually ended up leaving all of that in the first hotel that we stayed in. Yeah. Yeah. He really shouldn't have taken all that with him. Yeah. But he learned. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're good.
Were there any emotional moments where you just wanted to quit and play in a hotel for a week and be done with it?
Yes, absolutely. And that was when I arrived in Leon. And I was in so much pain and so much discomfort. And I've been writing these poems every day. And I'm literally writing them on the trail, right? And I'm thinking, what am I doing? I was so disappointed in myself. I thought, you know what? I really should be enjoying and paying more attention to myself and to my dad. And here I am writing these little poems, right? And I was so exhausted. And, you know, I get to Leon, and that's where we were going to stay for those 3 days. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to write anymore. I have another, 15 days to just relax, and I'm going to just focus on myself and my dad. And so I sat there in bed that day and that night, and I'm looking at my emails, and I get an email from a couple of friends, not you guys. And they said, Susana, we are really enjoying your poems. You know, we feel like we're on the Camino with you. Thank you so much. That was the saddest moment. Yeah. No, they're not. They're actually like in Michigan. Yeah. So yeah.
What about medication?
I only took my allergy pills, which obviously didn't work.
For your blisters and stuff, did you find?
You know what? That was very readily available. I mean, the Camino is, they're experts at blisters. Yeah, and I actually became an expert. I don't recommend that you do this, by the way, but I learned how to slice and drain my blisters. I got really good at it. Yeah. Do not do that. They can seriously get infected. I mean, I went through this whole procedure on how to do it and, disinfecting and blah, blah, blah. But otherwise, I just couldn't walk. I mean, can you imagine walking over rocks with your feet cut? I mean, it's just excruciating. Yeah, but the key is to keep your feet dry. And if I would have been able to do that with the poncho, then we wouldn't have had that issue.
So you did fly hiking this time.
Yes, we had, and that was another thing.
Steel toe. So
No, not with the steel toe.
with the
With the heavy tread on the bottom. Yeah.
heavy tread on the bottom. But some, so you don't hit that toe. You know,
Yeah, it has a little bit of extra protection. Yeah. But I'm glad you asked that, because my dad and I bought the same pair of shoes. And I've always had this theory that they make men's clothes better. My dad's shoes were good throughout the entire Camino. Mine were not. Mine wore out, and they were the exact same pair of shoes. Mine wore out halfway through, and I had to go to the pharmacy and get, because you cannot break in a new pair of shoes on the Camino, so you can't buy another one. You can't. And so I had to buy those little, what do they call it, Dr. Scholl's, and layer them up just so I could finish the Camino with the shoes.
How did you manage to live at the hospital?
Oh, it was only like it was 200 euros. Just a credit card. Yeah. And it's about maybe $300, $275, $300. It wasn't that bad. Yeah. Well, hey, it was either that or losing my eyeballs. You know what I mean? Priceless. I wanted to make sure I could keep, continue seeing when I came home. So it was about $200 or $300. But one thing I didn't do, I should have done, but I think I could have brought back the receipts and given them to my insurance, and they would have reimbursed me. I just didn't do it. Yeah. So make sure you keep all your receipts and do that.
They say a pilgrim changes people. Do you feel that this pilgrimage changed you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm here talking to you. Absolutely. I think it's, if the pilgrimage changed me. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely gave me a greater amount of confidence and in my artistic ability. I always wanted to write. I just didn't think I could. And my one goal when I went on the Camino, I said, I'm going to write a journal, because I love the journals. But the problem is that, you write a couple of pages and then you leave it when you don't like what you wrote. I didn't have a choice in this case because I was writing to my friends back home. So I was being held accountable every single day. Yeah. So it did change me. Yeah, definitely. For a good way. Definitely. Yeah.
Did you have a writing community at the time? Like, you said you were on Instagram. Right? So did you have like a writing community, or just other people helping you along with the writing?
No, I had nobody. No, and you know what the funny thing is that I actually did for the 9 months that I was preparing for the Camino, I was trying to figure out how to document it best. I didn't know if I was going to take pictures, if I was going to try to draw something, or if I was going to write. Finally, like 2 weeks before the Camino, it occurred to me to do poetry. And I had kind of played with it in the past, but never done it seriously. And so I gave myself a crash course in 2 weeks on how to do this. So Google is great, and so is YouTube. So those were my teachers for 2 weeks and to try to figure out how to do the sonnets. And you know what? The sonnets sound really complicated, but they're very formulaic. So as long as you follow the formula, it's 14 lines, 10 syllables, 3 stanzas plus the 2 lines at the end. Once you know the formula, it gets pretty simple. And it's just about, and the ending rhyme as well. So A, B, C, D, that kind of thing. So once you know the little formula and you just follow it, you're fine. It's just about trying to figure out the first 2 sentences and then making everything match up after that. Yeah. I know I made it sound watered down, but it was hard. But I handled it. Definitely. Oh, sure, of course. I have a favorite one in here. I read The Paris Wife before I left, and it's about Ernest Hemingway's first wife and all of the adventures they had in Pamplona and in Paris when they were out there. And he was writing, I think he wrote The Sun Also Rises during that time, and that was about Pamplona and the bullfights and all of that. And so I kind of channeled Ernest Hemingway when I was down there, and I wrote a little bit about him. Let's see if I can find it. I think it's sonnet 8. Where's it 8? Let's see. So it's sonnet 8, On the Way to Pamplona. The peaceful tranquility of our walk, shattered by the bustle of modern life. We gather and make new friends and make small talk about the region's political strife. We do as Hemingway and his friends did, but opt for coffee instead of red wine, and find pleasure in staying off the grid, as we hear tales more engaging than mine. We run and dodge imaginary bulls, the unnerving feeling of facing death, the slight chance of being trampled by hooves, the warm, moist, forceful exhale of their breath. We leave our handkerchiefs and grab our poles to put more kilometers on our souls. Yeah. Thank you. And I was talking about souls, not soles of your feet. No, he didn't. Actually, he didn't really know what I was doing. And he would see me. I had a little tiny notebook in my pocket and a little tiny pen in the other. And every time I would think of something, I would, take it out and scribble. And sometimes I would think, wow, it sounds really good. And then I would get back to the hotel and I'm like, oh my God, what the heck did I just write? And I had to go back and write the whole thing all over again. The sun does funny things to you when you're out there, It's like, wow, I'm such a fabulous writer. So no, he had no idea. Actually, he had no idea that I wrote the book. And I kept it a secret because, I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. And until I had it in hand, finally, the day it came out and it was at Romans, I took my dad to Romans and I said, hey, come with me. I'm going to take you to, I need to show you a book or something. I don't know what I said to him. And so the book was in the local section. And I said, hey, Dad, look, there's a book on the Camino. Do you want it? And he's like, no thanks. And so I said, no, Dad, look. And he got so excited. And so, he got so excited. He's showing it to everyone, giving copies to his friends. And it's been in a couple of little news magazines. And his friends have seen him in the pictures and stuff. So he's gotten a kick out of it. He really has. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you bring any autographed copies tonight?
Do we have any copies? Do you have some? Yeah, do you have a couple of copies that we're going to raffle? You do? We'll give you a certificate to get one. So we're going to raffle off 2 of them. You have them at work? Yeah, okay. So we'll raffle off 2 and we'll get them to you.
But they're at Romans.
Oh, they're Romans. Yes, you can get them Romans or on Amazon. Yeah.
What was it like to have so much one-on-one time with your father as an adult?
Oh, it's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. I mean, when do you get a chance to spend so much time with a parent? Seriously, I really honestly felt really lucky to have spent so much time with my dad, and it was such a great gift. And okay, I'm not gonna cry. So I remember when we came home, and excuse me. I promised I wasn't going to do that. And so we arrived in LAX. Thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you so much. And we arrived in LAX, and my dad just put his arm around me, and he just said, thank you. So yeah, it really meant a lot to him. It's really given him a lot, and I'm so happy that I was able to give him this gift, because then we got locked up in COVID, and so he had his little slides that he could watch on TV and stuff. So yeah, he had a really amazing time. If you have a chance to do that with a parent, a lot of parents do it with their kids. And the lady that I showed you on there, she was doing it with her daughter, and she's actually going back on Camino, and she's going to redo it with her daughter and her daughter's friend. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really good opportunity to do that. Yeah. No more make me cry questions, okay?
Susana, put into words for us how it drew you closer to your dad, being with him alone on the trail every day or at every meal. And so much for so long. I mean, I can only imagine how that can't help but draw people closer. But put it in words.
I think what it was, you're going through something so difficult, and you're constantly in a challenge every single day. If it's not raining, it's really sunny. If you're not going up a hill, you're going over really heavy rocks. I mean, it's just a challenge, and it was about us getting through it together and being able to finish. That was the goal all the time, to just being able to finish it together. And there was a day or so where he had a little bit of leg pain, and he started having some doubts. I had doubts the whole time myself. For me, I had a really hard time, but I knew that regardless of the discomfort that I had, I really needed to finish it for my dad, because I knew how much it meant to him. Yeah. And I don't know where he remembered the Camino, because like I said, he told me he didn't want to talk about it. And the next thing you know, he wanted to go on it. There was no dialogue in between. So it might have, I guess it stayed in his head, or he talked to somebody about it. I don't know if he talked to you about it. I have no idea. So he came up with this idea to go, and he's always up for a challenge. But it was, I think, all of the difficulties that we went through together, and it's given us so much more to talk about, because we keep in contact with a lot of our friends in the Camino, so we have that to share. And, we always think back on all the people that we saw, all the things that we did. So we have conversation all the time. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the common experience. Exactly. Yeah, and we both like to eat, so that helped. Yeah, we both had a serious sweet tooth. So we had a lot of things in common on the Camino. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, definitely. Any other questions? Anybody want to organize the next trip? Yeah? Yeah. And with that, let's do it.
My trip, having you to come along with some of my friends, we would just go to Paris, go through all the moves, and then we would hit Central.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? I can't tell you, when we did that little connection over in Paris, I thought, maybe we should just stay here for 5 weeks. Yes, it did. I was like, okay, maybe I could just lose these connection, tickets, and just, cancel the whole and just stay in Paris for 5 weeks. Nobody will know, Very tempted. I've really appreciated all the support all of you have given me. Everybody's been so amazing through this whole journey. This has really been a friend book. Not only was it written for friends, my friends all pushed me to do it, and now you're here supporting me, watching me. So it's a little overwhelming. So I'm really thankful to have the support from all of you. I'm really grateful.